Welcome to Fam Fantasy, where transformation, elegance, and self-discovery come to life. I remember the sound before I remember the scene. The soft hum of fluorescent lights, that sterile, distant buzz echoing in my ears as I stared at my reflection. It wasn't even a mirror, really. Just a window that happened to catch my face, pale and uncertain, eyes too wide for comfort. I looked like someone who didn't belong anywhere. Maybe that's what I was. The story everyone knows about me is simple. Quiet boy, always alone, good at drawing, bad at talking. But that's not the truth. The truth is I was hiding from something I didn't have words for, something that flickered behind every mirror, every reflection, every dream. A version of me that smiled differently, softer, freer. It all started the morning I got the letter. A pale pink envelope slipped through the door, sealed with a wax stamp shaped like a ribbon. No name, no sender. Just a message written in elegant handwriting. Your potential awaits. Report to the academy at dawn. I thought it was a joke. I mean, who sends handwritten letters in this century? But there was something magnetic about it. The way the paper smelled faintly like rosewater. The way my name was written, Elliot, with a curl that made it look almost feminine. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about what potential meant. I didn't think I had any. My mother used to say I was too sensitive for my own good, the kind of boy who flinched at his own reflection. Maybe she was right. The next morning, fog hung low over the street. The world felt muted, wrapped in cotton. I followed the address on the letter until I stood before a tall, ivy-covered building that looked more like an old boarding school than an academy. A brass plaque read only one word, Primrose. I almost turned back. But then I saw her, a tall woman standing at the gate, wearing a pastel blazer and a smile that seemed to see right through me. Elliot, she said, as if she'd been expecting me. Welcome to Primrose Academy. I hesitated. I think there's been a mistake. There are no mistakes here, she said gently, her eyes kind but knowing. Only beginnings. The way she said it sent a strange shiver down my spine. Beginnings. It sounded both hopeful and terrifying. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of lavender and chalk dust. Girls in neat uniforms moved gracefully between rooms, their laughter echoing softly. I felt completely out of place, clutching my backpack like a lifeline. Then the woman, she introduced herself as Headmistress Claire, handed me a small box wrapped in satin ribbon. This is your uniform, she said. Your lessons begin today. I froze. Uniform? But I'm not. Not yet, she interrupted, her tone neither sharp nor soft, just final. But that's why you're here. I didn't understand what she meant. My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, neatly folded, lay a pastel blouse, a pleated skirt, and a delicate silver necklace with a small heart-shaped charm. For a moment I thought it was some kind of prank. But no one laughed. The air felt too still, too serious. Why me? I asked quietly. Headmistress Claire tilted her head. Because you've been living half a life, Elliot. It's time you met the other half. Something in me wanted to run, but something deeper, quieter, made me stay. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the longing to finally understand why every mirror had always felt like a lie. That day, they gave me a room. They told me to change. My fingers shook as I held the blouse. It was soft, lighter than air. The skirt whispered as I lifted it, the fabric brushing my wrist like a secret. When I finally faced the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different. I didn't, not really, but because for the first time, I saw a spark of something I never dared to look for. It scared me, but it also made my chest feel warm in a way that words couldn't touch. As I stood there, staring at that strange reflection, I realized the mirror had never lied. I had. And that realization, quiet, trembling, beautiful, was the moment everything began to change. I don't think I'll ever forget that morning light, soft, golden, almost kind. It slipped through the lace curtains and touched everything gently, like the world was trying not to wake me too suddenly. But I was already awake. I'd been awake for hours, lying there in the pastel dorm room with my heart thudding too loudly for comfort. The uniform hung neatly on the chair beside me. I'd folded it the night before, as if tidiness could somehow make it feel less strange. But no amount of folding could erase the question burning in my chest. Why did wearing it feel so right? I tried to shake the thought away as I buttoned the blouse. The fabric whispered softly against my skin, light as breath. My reflection in the small mirror across the room looked uncertain, like I was watching someone else slowly come to life. There was a knock on the door. I froze. "Elliot," a soft voice called. "It's time for orientation." It was a girl's voice, cheerful, lilting, maybe a little too bright for this hour. I opened the door to find a student standing there, smiling warmly. She had strawberry blonde hair tied with a pink ribbon and freckles scattered like tiny stars across her nose. "I'm Lily," she said. "I'm your guide today." Her confidence was disarming. She didn't look at me like I was strange. She didn't even blink at the awkwardness in my posture. "Come on," she said. "You don't want to be late for your first class." "My first class?" I asked, following her down the corridor. She giggled. "Everyone starts with presentation and poise." The classroom looked more like a studio, full-length mirrors, racks of neatly pressed uniforms, and soft classical music playing in the background. At the center stood Headmistress Claire, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, students," she said. "Today's lesson is simple: perception. What you see versus what others see. And the harmony between the two." Her gaze swept the room and landed on me for a moment. Transformation isn't about pretending. It's about listening. Listening. The word sank deep into me. I didn't know what she meant yet, but I wanted to. She asked each student to step forward, stand before the mirror, and describe what they saw. When it was my turn, I hesitated. The others had spoken with such confidence, words like grace, strength, beauty. I didn't have any of that. I started, my voice catching. "Someone who doesn't belong here." Headmistress Claire nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that. "And what do you wish you saw?" The question hit harder than I thought it would. What did I wish for? A version of myself that fit? One that didn't make me feel like a walking contradiction? "I don't know," I whispered. "Maybe, someone who isn't afraid to exist." Silence filled the room, soft but heavy. Claire stepped closer, her tone gentle. "Then that's who you'll meet, Elliot. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon." After class, Lily caught up to me in the hallway. "She's right, you know," she said. "The mirror isn't scary once you start listening to it." I gave a small, uncertain smile. "You sound like you've done this before." "Oh, I have," she said, tucking her ribboned hair behind her ear. "We all have. No one comes to Primrose by accident." That night, I sat by the mirror again. The necklace Claire had given me, the one with the tiny heart charm, caught the light every time I moved. It became a little symbol of the question I couldn't answer yet: who am I becoming? As I watched my reflection, the air in the room felt different, almost alive, like the mirror itself was waiting for me to speak. But all I could whisper was, "I'm trying." And for the first time, it felt like the reflection whispered back, "I know." Days at Primrose blurred together at first. Mornings filled with soft music and polished floors, afternoons scented with tea and faint traces of perfume from the girls' dorms. Everything about the place felt impossibly calm, as if it existed in a world untouched by noise or rush. Yet inside me, there was nothing calm. Every time I buttoned that blouse, I felt both closer to and farther from myself. The fabric was like a question I couldn't stop asking. Some mornings, I'd stare into the mirror and almost recognize the person looking back, not as Elliot, not as someone pretending, but as someone emerging. Then I'd blink, and the old fear would return, whispering, "What are you doing?" It was Lily who first taught me how to breathe through that fear. We were assigned as partners in Expression and Grace, a class that was part posture, part psychology. Our instructor, Miss Evelyn, said it wasn't about how we looked but how we moved through the world. "Posture tells the truth even when words don't," she said, gliding across the room with effortless poise. "Stand as if you deserve to exist." I tried. My back stiffened, my hands fumbled. Lily smiled kindly. "Don't force it," she whispered. "Just let yourself feel lighter." Lighter. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. I'd carried weight for so long, of expectation, confusion, guilt, that I didn't even know how to set it down. During one exercise, we had to walk across the room, pause before the mirror, and say one thing we liked about what we saw. Most students giggled softly, their voices steady. When it was my turn, my chest tightened. My reflection waited, patient. My voice cracked. "I like that I'm trying." It wasn't much, but it was real.
Miss Evelyn gave a small nod, and Lily squeezed my hand. "That's the bravest answer of all," she said quietly. That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the heart-shaped charm again. It shimmered faintly in the lamplight. I wondered if it meant something, if maybe it was meant to remind me that even fragile things could still hold meaning. As I traced its outline, I realized something had shifted. For the first time since arriving at Primrose, I wasn't thinking about what others might see. I was thinking about what I wanted to see, not perfection, not approval, just honesty. In the quiet of that evening, surrounded by the faint hum of laughter from the halls, I whispered into the mirror, "I don't want to hide anymore." The reflection didn't smile. It didn't change. But somehow, its stillness felt like an answer, as if the person inside was finally listening, too. The next morning, Lily left a note on my desk, folded into the shape of a small paper heart. Inside, she'd written only 5 words. "Be patient with your bloom." I didn't know why, but I kept that note close to my heart all day. Maybe because it felt like permission to take my time, to let softness be strength instead of shame. And for the first time since coming to Primrose, I walked into class not as a mistake to be corrected, but as a work in progress worth understanding. By the end of the first week, the rhythm of Primrose had settled into me. Wake up, breathe, learn, reflect. Everything was precise yet strangely freeing. But somewhere beneath that calm surface, a restless unease began to stir. The world outside still existed, the one where I was Elliot, the shy boy who never spoke above a whisper, the one who'd never imagined himself in a skirt or surrounded by lace curtains and mirrors. That version of me didn't disappear. He lingered, watching from the edges, whispering things I didn't want to hear. "This isn't real. You'll never fit here. They'll all see it eventually." I thought I was getting better at silencing that voice, until the day of the confidence evaluation. It wasn't as intimidating as it sounded. Miss Evelyn explained it as a moment to stand before the class and read a short piece about how we saw ourselves. Everyone took turns, their voices trembling at first but growing stronger with every sentence. Some spoke of acceptance, others of rediscovery. Then it was my turn. I held the paper in my shaking hands. My palms felt clammy, my throat dry. The mirror behind the instructor reflected me back in real time. The soft blouse, the uncertain eyes, the heart charm catching the light. I began, then faltered. "I don't know if I belong here." Silence. A few eyes flickered toward me, not judgmental, just curious. I forced myself to keep going. When I look in the mirror, sometimes I see someone I want to be. But then I remember who I was before all this, and it feels like those two people can't possibly live in the same body. My voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to disappear, but then Lily spoke softly from the front row. "They can," she said. Everyone turned toward her, but she didn't look away from me. "They can live in the same body, because they already do." Something in her words hit deeper than I expected. I felt the sting behind my eyes, that familiar ache of trying not to cry. Miss Evelyn stepped forward and rested a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Transformation doesn't erase who you were," she said. "It lets that part finally breathe." After class, I sat outside under the ivy-covered archway, the air cool against my face. The campus felt timeless in moments like that, birds singing, leaves whispering. I let myself cry quietly, not from sadness, but from the strange relief of being seen. Lily joined me a few minutes later, sitting beside me without a word. After a while, she said, "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" I shook my head. "I see someone who's learning to be gentle with themselves," she said. "And that's rarer than you think." We sat there for a long time, just listening to the wind. It carried faint music from somewhere inside the school, a piano, soft and searching. It reminded me of the mirror again, and how it never spoke but always answered. That night, I stood before it one more time. I still didn't have all the answers, but I wasn't afraid of the questions anymore. My reflection didn't seem so unfamiliar now. Maybe because it wasn't waiting to judge, only to grow with me. And as the lamplight flickered across the heart-shaped charm, I finally said something I'd never dared to say aloud. "I'm not broken. I'm becoming." The reflection seemed to breathe with me. The boy who had once hidden his face was still there, but now he smiled softly, as if he, too, had been waiting for this moment. The morning of my 5th week at Primrose began with rain, the kind that didn't crash or thunder, just whispered steadily against the windows, a sound that filled every silence like a lullaby. The whole academy moved slower that day.
Even Lily's usual cheer softened into something thoughtful as she brushed raindrops from her sleeves.
"It's a mirror day," she said with a small smile. I frowned. "A what?" She laughed softly.
When it rains, everyone here says it's a mirror day. Because the world looks different, but still itself, quiet, reflective, a little blurred around the edges.
Kind of like us. Something about that lingered in me. A mirror day.
Maybe that's exactly what transformation felt like. The same world, the same person, just seen differently. That afternoon, we had our first presentation walk. It wasn't a performance, exactly. More of an exercise in authenticity, Miss Evelyn said. Each student would walk down the studio floor, not to display but to express, to let their movements match their truth. When my turn came, I felt my pulse quicken. The music started. Slow piano chords, fragile as glass. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. At first, I moved like I always had, cautious, measured, as if every step might be wrong. But then Lily's words from the week before echoed in my mind. They can live in the same body. So I stopped trying to separate the parts of me. I walked not as Elliot pretending to be someone else, but as both halves at once, the shy boy who once hid behind sketchbooks, and the quiet figure in the mirror learning to take up space in softness. Somewhere between those steps, the two stopped fighting. They began to dance. When the music ended, the room was silent. Not from awkwardness, but from something gentler, a shared quiet that felt like understanding. Miss Evelyn smiled. "That," she said softly, "was honesty." Afterward, I sat alone in the art studio, still trembling from the weight of it all. The rain had stopped, leaving the glass windows streaked with faint trails of light. My reflection shimmered in the window's surface, not sharp, not certain, but calm. I reached up to touch the little heart charm around my neck, and for the first time, it didn't feel like something I'd been given. It felt like something I'd earned. Lily joined me a few minutes later, holding 2 cups of tea. "You were beautiful out there," she said simply. I laughed nervously. "Beautiful's not really my word."
"It should be," she replied.
"Because it fits, not the kind of beauty that tries too hard, but the kind that finally stops hiding." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. A real smile. The kind that starts small but reaches your eyes before you notice. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, as I always did, but this time I wasn't testing myself. I was saying goodnight to a friend. And as I turned off the lamp, I whispered the word Lily had given me, beautiful, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. The reflection didn't change, but something inside me did. Time moved strangely at Primrose. Some days felt endless, like a gentle dream stretching toward eternity. Others passed in an instant, leaving only faint traces, the smell of lavender in the halls, the distant sound of piano keys, laughter that faded too soon. By then, I'd grown comfortable. Too comfortable, maybe. My reflection no longer startled me. My hands no longer trembled when I adjusted my blouse. Even my voice had changed slightly, softer, rounder, like it had stopped trying to hide its hesitations. But comfort has a way of testing you. It began with a message. A short text from my mother, just 6 words long. "When are you coming back home?" The words hit harder than they should have. For weeks, Primrose had been my world, a bubble of quiet acceptance. But the thought of home cracked that calm wide open. I stared at the phone for a long time, unsure how to respond. Home. The word felt different now. Once it meant safety, predictability. But now, it felt like a place that wouldn't understand this new, fragile truth. Lily noticed my silence that afternoon in class. "Bad news?" she asked gently. "Not bad," I said. "Just reality." She nodded like she knew exactly what that meant. Primrose isn't about running away from who you were. It's about learning how to bring who you're becoming back into the world. Her words made sense, but they scared me. What if the world didn't want that version of me? What if I walked out there and everything fell apart? Later that evening, I went for a walk through the garden. The air smelled of rain-soaked roses, and the cobblestones shimmered faintly in the lamplight. I sat by the small fountain at the center, tracing the edge of the water with my fingertip. The reflection staring back was soft but uncertain, the heart charm glowing faintly against my collarbone. Headmistress Claire found me there. She always seemed to appear when I needed guidance the most. "You're thinking about leaving," she said gently. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to stay here forever. But part of me knows I can't."
She smiled, not unkindly.
Transformation is never complete inside walls, Elliot. The world needs to see who you've become, and you need to see how strong you truly are.
But what if they don't understand?
Then you'll teach them, she said simply. Not with speeches, not with defiance, but with the quiet courage of being exactly who you are.
Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, I couldn't sleep.
I sat by the window, staring at the moonlight on the mirror. It was the same mirror that had terrified me weeks ago, the same one that had taught me to listen, to forgive, to see. And now, it was showing me something else, the reflection of someone ready to step into the world, even if that world wasn't ready for them. The next morning, I wrote back to my mother.
Soon.
But I might not look exactly how you remember. I stared at the message before hitting send, my hands trembling.
It wasn't an apology. It was a truth.
And for once, that felt like enough. As I slipped the heart charm between my fingers, I realized it wasn't just a reminder of Primrose. It was a promise that the softness I'd found here wasn't something fragile. It was strength, quiet and unbreakable. When I looked up, the reflection in the mirror seemed to nod, as if to say, yes.
You're ready.
The day I left Primrose, the sky was clear, too clear, almost cruelly bright. I stood by the gate with my suitcase at my feet, the sound of morning birds tangled with the low hum of the city beyond the hill. The world felt bigger than I remembered, louder somehow. Lily was there, of course, smiling but holding back tears.
You'll visit, right? She asked, trying to sound casual.
I will, I promised, though my voice wavered. She reached into her pocket and handed me a folded ribbon, pale pink, soft as breath.
For courage, she said.
Not that you need it anymore.
I smiled, looping it gently around the handle of my bag.
I think I'll always need it. Headmistress Claire appeared behind her, hands clasped neatly. Remember, Elliot, she said, the world may question what it doesn't understand.
But you don't need to answer every question. Just live the answer.
I didn't trust myself to speak, so I nodded. Then, with a last look at the ivy-covered walls that had become a second home, I walked out the gate and down the hill. The city felt unfamiliar, even though it hadn't changed.
People hurried past, eyes fixed on their phones.
The sounds of traffic filled the air. I caught my reflection in a shop window, the pastel blouse beneath my jacket, the heart charm glinting faintly in the light. For the first time, I didn't flinch from it. Still, when I reached my neighborhood, nerves returned in waves. My mother's house looked exactly the same. The chipped blue door, the hanging wind chime, the faint smell of coffee drifting from the window. I stood on the porch for a long time, rehearsing words I didn't have. When the door opened, she froze. Her eyes went from my face to my clothes to the ribbon on my bag.
Elliot, she said softly.
Hi, Mom.
My voice cracked on the second word. There was a long pause.
I braced myself for confusion, maybe anger.
But she just stepped aside. You must be cold. Come in.
The warmth of the living room hit me. The same old couch, the same faded curtains, everything just as it had been.
And yet, I wasn't the same. We sat at the table in silence for a while.
Finally, she said, you look different. I feel different, I replied carefully. Her eyes softened, but her expression was still unreadable. Is this what they taught you there?
I hesitated.
No, I said quietly. It's what I learned.
She studied me for a long moment.
Then, to my surprise, she reached across the table and touched the heart charm. You used to hide your drawings, remember? She said. You'd tear up the ones that didn't look like you wanted. Maybe now you're just learning not to tear yourself up anymore. The words hit me harder than she knew. My throat tightened. Maybe, I whispered. She gave a small, weary smile. You've always been my child, Elliot.
I just want you to be kind to yourself.
And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe acceptance didn't always look like understanding. Maybe sometimes, it looked like love trying its best to catch up. That night, as I unpacked, I set the mirror from Primrose on my desk.
Its surface caught the glow from the streetlights outside.
My reflection looked back, calm and steady. I touched the charm at my neck and whispered, we made it. Outside, the wind chime sang softly, the same tune it always had, but somehow, it sounded new. The first week back home felt like walking through a familiar dream that no longer fit. Everything looked the same. The creak in the hallway floorboard, the ticking clock above the kitchen table, the smell of rain in the garden. Yet every detail felt slightly off, as if the world was waiting to see who I'd become before deciding how to treat me. At first, I tried to move quietly, careful not to disturb the balance of things. I helped with groceries, answered questions about the academy in vague, harmless phrases, and smiled when my mother said she was proud of me, even though I could see she didn't quite understand why. But silence has its own weight. It presses against you until you start to wonder if maybe you imagined your own growth. The mirror I'd brought back from Primrose sat on my desk, catching faint light from the window. I avoided it at first. Part of me was afraid the reflection would vanish now that I was back here, in this old world. But one morning, I couldn't resist. I sat before it, still wearing the blouse beneath a cardigan, the heart charm resting just below my collarbone. The reflection was steady, patient. For a long time, I just stared. "Are you still there?" I whispered. And though it didn't move, didn't speak, I felt the answer rise quietly inside me. "You never left." That day, I took a walk through the neighborhood. Children rode bicycles past me, leaves scattered along the pavement, and the world spun on, unchanged, unconcerned. But I wasn't the same. The world hadn't gotten smaller, but I'd learned to see more of it. When I reached the small park where I used to sit alone after school, I found the same bench under the oak tree, weathered and chipped. I sat there for a while, tracing initials carved into the wood. They were old, fragments of other people's stories, their small attempts at permanence. I thought of Primrose, of the laughter in the halls, of Lily's ribbon tied to my bag, fluttering in the breeze. I realized then that transformation wasn't something that happened once. It was something that kept happening, in the quiet choices, the small acts of self-honesty, the moments you stop apologizing for breathing differently. That night, my mother knocked on my door before bed. She lingered in the doorway, looking at the mirror, at me. "You seem peaceful," she said. I smiled. "I think I am." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "That's good. I like seeing you like this." When she left, I turned back to the mirror, the heart charm glinting faintly in the lamplight. My reflection smiled, not wide or perfect, but real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing on opposite sides of the glass. I reached out and touched the surface gently, feeling the coolness under my fingertips. It didn't feel like a barrier anymore. It felt like a window, not between two versions of me, but between what I'd been and everything I still could become. Outside, the night wind rustled the trees, carrying a faint melody, maybe the echo of that old piano from Primrose, or maybe just the sound of the world exhaling. Either way, it felt like a promise. Spring arrived quietly that year. The world softened, mornings smelled of rain and lilac, and the light through my window felt different, warmer, more forgiving. I'd begun sketching again, something I hadn't done in years. It started one morning without thought, a pencil in my hand, an empty page, and a need to see what the inside of my heart might look like if it— At first, the lines came awkwardly. Then, slowly, they began to flow. I drew the ivy walls of Primrose, the reflection in the old mirror, the tiny heart charm glowing softly against a pale blouse. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I knew it was me. My mother found the drawing later that week. She stood by the doorway, holding it with careful hands. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you," I murmured, unsure if she knew what it meant. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. "It looks peaceful." That word again. Peaceful. I used to think peace meant silence, the absence of conflict. Now I knew it meant something else, the presence of truth, even when it trembled. I started helping out at a small community art space downtown, just a few afternoons a week, teaching kids to paint, draw, and make messes without fear. They didn't ask questions about me, they just accepted. Maybe children are better at seeing without labeling. One afternoon, a girl about 8 years old looked up at me and asked, "Why do you always wear that necklace?" I smiled, touching the heart charm. "Because it reminds me to be kind." "To yourself?" she asked. I nodded. "Especially to myself." She grinned, as if that made perfect sense, then went back to painting. That night, walking home through the soft spring air, I passed by a storefront window and caught my reflection again. It was faint, blurred by the glow of city lights, but I saw it clearly. Not just the clothes or the hair, but the stillness behind the eyes, the quiet pride of someone who had finally stopped hiding.
I thought of Lily then.
I still hadn't written her, though I kept her ribbon tied to my bag.
I promised myself I would soon.
Maybe I'd tell her that the world outside wasn't as frightening as I thought, that the mirror days didn't end when I left Primrose. They just changed shape. At home, I placed my sketch of the mirror above my desk. Beneath it, the real mirror caught my reflection, overlapping with the drawn one. It felt symbolic somehow, the person I'd imagined, the person I'd become, existing in the same frame. For a long moment, I stood there, breathing quietly. Then I said it out loud, not to the reflection, but to the room, to the air, to everything. I'm here. Simple words, but they filled the space like light. And maybe, I thought, that's what transformation really is, not a change of form, but a declaration. A soft, steady, fearless I'm here. Outside, the wind changed. The curtains fluttered. And for the first time, the reflection and the world beyond it seemed to move in perfect rhythm. The summer that followed felt like a second beginning. The air shimmered with heat, flowers spilled over every fence, and life moved with a slow rhythm of days that no longer needed to rush. I'd begun to fill the house with color again, sketches pinned to the wall, half-finished paintings leaning against the furniture. My mother pretended to complain about the clutter, but she always smiled when she said it. Sometimes, I caught her studying the drawings in the evening light, her expression soft and distant, as though she could finally see the thread that connected the quiet child I once was to the person standing before her now. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting stopped my breath, delicate, looping, unmistakable. Dear Elliot, the garden misses you.
So do we.
Lily. Inside was a small photograph. The courtyard of Primrose, sunlight spilling through the glass windows, the fountain glimmering in the center. I traced the edges of the picture with my thumb, remembering the way the water had sounded when I sat there, whispering to my reflection. That evening, I walked to the park, the photograph tucked into my pocket. The same bench waited beneath the oak tree, now surrounded by tall grass and tiny white blossoms. I sat there until dusk, thinking of everything Primrose had taught me, how courage could be soft, how mirrors could be kind, how transformation was never about disguise, but discovery.
A gentle breeze passed through the trees.
For a moment, the leaves shimmered like the ribbons Lily used to wear in her hair.
I closed my eyes and smiled.
I'm still blooming, I whispered. When I opened my eyes, the world felt vast and tender all at once, the sky streaked with gold, the city humming quietly below, every reflection in every window catching a little bit of light. At home, I placed the photograph beside the mirror on my desk. The two images, Primrose and my reflection, faced each other, like pages of a story finally complete. I untied Lily's ribbon from my bag and draped it over the mirror's corner. It fluttered slightly, as if acknowledging me. The heart-shaped charm at my neck caught the lamplight. I touched it gently and smiled. It wasn't a symbol of who I was told to be, or even who I'd become. It was simply a reminder of the moment I'd stopped running, the moment I'd chosen to see myself clearly, and to stay. The mirror glowed faintly in the warm light, its surface calm, unbroken. My reflection looked back, not as Elliot the shy boy or as the student who once trembled at her own image, but as a whole person. One who had learned that gentleness was not weakness, that identity could be fluid and real at once, that truth could live quietly and still be bright. And in that stillness, something beautiful unfolded. Not an ending, but the quiet certainty that beginnings never really stop. I smiled, small, steady, certain.
Because I was here.
Because I was enough.
Because, finally, I was real.